one of the things I really wanted to dive into here was, we just finished the Q1 of 2022, which is supposed to be, the first year or so after. We're about a year into the apocalypse, where basically Facebook ads can't possibly work anymore and every digital marketer is completely doomed because of Apple. And knowing that all of those prophecies were 100% true. And yeah, I'm being completely sarcastic in that way. I'm really interested to know sort of like how things are working for you all, because I've actually been seeing some really good success in the last 3 months, but I know that it has been difficult for people, especially with respect to the stock market going down and buying consumer intent and all of these other things. As somebody that sits across multiple brands, maybe I'll go to you, Sammy, to start off with. How are you seeing Q1 from 2022 play out, and how's it been working for you?
January and February was a dream. It was like I was just like I had all my clients had like really great like content, broad audiences, Power of Five. Everything was going really, really well. Couldn't have been happier. Went into the first week of March, kind of the same story, and then in Australia, we got a lot of our freedoms back, and all the restrictions got lifted, travel restrictions got lifted, and all that kind of stuff. So people over the sort of last sort of 2 or 3 weeks of March stopped buying like less stuff that they don't need, and everyone just started booking trips. So kind of saw a bit of a hit over the last couple of weeks. Everyone I know is flying somewhere or going somewhere or is booked to do something just because we now have these like post-COVID freedoms. So that's kind of like hit a little bit hard. Things starting to turn around in April. I think there's just that like romantic period where you're like, oh, I can travel. I'm just going to book a million things and go and do all this stuff. And it kind of does seem to be slowing down now, going into like Q2 and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at the moment. It's a bit of an interesting like turn, where it's like freedom's announced next day, you know.
Ads just die because everybody's paying money for travel.
Everyone's doing other things, but I
Makes
mean,
sense.
good for travel industry, I guess.
Sure.
A lot of
All of you with
restaurants
your
like getting
dynamic ads for travel. I don't think that exists anymore. I remember that was like a big
yeah,
thing back in the day.
yeah.
What about you, Lord of Ads? How's it been going for you this wonderful Q1? Or maybe it wasn't wonderful for you. Let's find out.
Let's find out indeed. Well, I actually wasn't running ads in January. It took like maybe a month and a week hiatus, which was actually really well needed. I think that's something that you're always on in a certain degree. Like when you're running ads, even if you take a week or two off, you're still thinking in the back of your mind, like
Yeah.
what's the performance? It was a really nice period of time where I could really just take a step back after all the shenanigans of 2021, and yeah, just take a nice, well-deserved and well-needed break. February, I got back into the swing of things. I actually did not see very good performance in February overall. And it was a really interesting shift that I noticed as well. And this could just be, anecdotal based on the accounts that I've been working on over that period of time. But as soon as we got into maybe the second week of March, I noticed a bit of an uptick in general performance across the board. February, I mean, it was at like what, 0.8, 0.9. March gets to like 1.1, 1.2, like that kind of disparity. That could have been to individual creative testing. That could have been to offer landing page testing, anecdotal. But it was a general trend that I did notice across the broader span of accounts that I've been working on. So March has definitely been a better month.
I love it. Yeah, I'll tell you, I had a lot of success over January and February and March. And I mentioned it, like, CBD biz went from a couple hundred to a couple grand. My, clothing business went from a few grand to five figures and more. But I want to also preface that with a lot of the success I had in the beginning of Q1 was in kind of fixing up some desperation and some damage that had occurred at the end of Q4. I think at the end of Q4, people are throwing money at anything they possibly can for the holiday, for Black Friday.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is just you destroy the machine learning, and you end up like having all of these things. And look, we can talk about best practices and what you're supposed to do, but it's like, we're just like scrambling for every dollar that we possibly can get. And I think one of the reasons that I saw week over week gains, I mean, one I'd like to attribute it to just me being good, but more realistically, probably to do with just cleaning up the shit that didn't work. And I can't tell you how many times I talk to folks, and their biggest issue is they're just messy, right? They're like supporting too many things. They're trying to do too many objectives. They're asking their dollar to go too far.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. In one use case, there was a brand where they were like November, December, promoting like 5-6 items, right? Across like 6 to 8 campaigns. And then I come in, and the easiest win that we had there was we just got down to the single best offer. And I just released this Twitter thread on it, and I'll make some more around it, but this concept on PSM around like profitable scaling margin. I found the product with the CPA and CPA and COGS to LTV that gave me the best opportunity to scale.
Yeah.
And what I did is I basically just cut everything else out. And as a result, every penny went into investing into this margin. And because I wasn't asking the machine to do like 20 different things, it did the one thing extraordinarily well. That being said, I don't, some of people are seeing this and like, oh man, it was terrible. I do want to definitely call out, and I made a video about this, and there was definitely some conversations where I have noticed over the last 10 years that when the stock market does well, anybody can start a business and make money. And when the stock market does poorly, everybody that's not selling toilet paper and food suffers. And, so with that being said, I think a lot of brands saw this hit towards middle of February that didn't come back until the beginning of March with World War III and whatever else that was going on, that really, there was fear in the markets and interest rates rising and everything else, that I think people forget that there's real individuals on the other sides of those dollars. It's like, I saw something, a buddy of mine's like, my landlord is living my paycheck to paycheck, because if I don't pay my rent, then they get audited by their bank for not making the bills. And I was just like, that stood out to me, because your business might rely on your customers buying from you, which makes sense. But if they don't have the money, you're out of business. Like, business model is so important. And I just want to say that, like, I feel those types of things happen. So all of that being said, like, I'm interested to know, as some lessons going into Q2, like, what are some things that you all are doing to try to pivot based on what you've learned in Q1 and knowing what everybody's doing now with, maybe you've adopted Triple Whale or any of these other lovely things. How are you pivoting for this setup? Because let's be honest, I'm very certain in 60 days, everybody's going to whine about their ads not working because we hit the summer, and the summer is always bad every year. So I'm curious what you guys are doing over the next 45, 60 days to set up for the real apocalypse that'll come with basically the decline in user intent come summer. Well, I guess for us here it's summer. For you, Sammy, it's the cold season. So fair enough.
Yeah. Coming into winter now. I get my big thing at the moment, and this is something that I've been working with all my clients on. And when you say it, like, no one ever understands. And I actually obviously stole this from you, Charlie, but no one ever understands it. But I'm going back and looking at every single ad that we've ever had that hasn't performed, and then working on how we can improve those things. I think, like, if you have I'm on Broad, I'm on Power 5 with pretty much all my ads. So we have a structure, which is the best practices, and we know that it's working. So we're kind of in this thing where we're like, okay, let's go over every single ad that we have individually and work out why that didn't work, and identify, for whatever reason, why it didn't, and basically make less bad shit. And then we can kind of just focus on making less of the bad stuff, more of the good stuff. And over time, that slow piece of video or that hook or that whatever it is that didn't work in that time. Like we just don't put them in. So that's my big focus at the moment. It's just so like content focused. That's really what I'm doing to kind of combat all the stuff that's going on. Is just constantly putting out, the best variations of content that we can.
Fair play. I'll put out a quick note. I haven't, Charlie, you're going to love this. I haven't tested an interest since I started running ads again back in February. And I have never seen more, happiness inside of me waking up every morning, not having to play around with the interests in the ad sets. Broad, I mean, it's true though. Broad is the best performer. Yeah. And we'll get to this in like the biggest lessons of iOS section, which you had laid down. But like to give the general lay of the land here, like before iOS, it was a controversial thing whether or not Broad was the best solution long-term at scale. Now it's not so controversial. There's been a market paradigm shift, I believe, at least in the high-end advertiser community, maybe not in like the beginner space where they're taking up the information that's published on YouTube from gurus that want to make money. But the people who actually know what they're doing, there's been a big shift, in my opinion. Two other things that I've noticed specifically in Q1, Q4 leading up to Q1 as well, lessons that'll take into Q2 and the rest of the year. One, there's a big battle right now for market share in data attribution. In-platform is very unreliable. And, you can't rely on it to make informed decisions as an advertiser these days. Hopefully that'll change in the next couple of years when Meta gets their shit together and builds an API with the top e-commerce platforms. But for right now, we have to deal with this competitive war between platforms like Triple Whale, Northbeam, Mixpanel, you name the rest of them. And I've been experimenting personally with all of those. There's not a clear winner. Basically, what I would look for if you're out there and not sure what to try is making sure you're able to get first touch and last touch data, as well as being able to view in semi-real time the difference in conversions from backend API by ad set and ad level, rather than just taking a look at the account as a whole. So those are the important notes with the data stuff. But that market itself will evolve over the next couple months and probably the next year or two. Secondly is the creative side of things. There have been a lot of, pop-up businesses sprouted from agencies that pitch the whole editing at a whim service, as in you give them a piece of content or you give them a brief and they have maybe an overseas team that sends you content back, UGC mashup, stuff like that. What I've noticed is it's not as high quality as paying the premium that still existed before this even made a shift to the market. But at the same time, when you get down to the granular level of trying to get incremental lift at scale, split testing micro variables is the number one way to do that once you already have winning angles and winning creative in the accounts already. And that's where I see a ton of value being shifted from the big creative agencies to maybe like the small constant creative. I'll give them a shout out. Editing teams that'll give you constant creative back for a monthly retainer or something like that. So those are the learnings that I've taken. We'll see how those progress over the rest of the year.
Yeah, I love it. And that business is so aptly named, isn't it? I got to agree. I think a lot of this, and maybe this can really parlay directly into, the next section, which is, lessons from iOS 14. I think one of the things that I've really leaned into coming out of Q1, going into Q2, and really over the last year is, I think that for me personally, one of the biggest struggles was in educating the people that pay me to spend money to make them successful and to understand how things work. And part of that is educating them in how stuff works. Part of that is also in being able to truly point to specific metrics that matter and really understanding my role as